The morning sun bathed the streets of downtown Atlanta in a warm glow as Marcus Carter adjusted his tie in the reflection of a shop window. At 32 years old, Marcus was the definition of resilience. Standing at 6 feet 1 inch, with broad shoulders and deep brown skin, he carried himself with quiet confidence. His sharp jawline, neatly trimmed beard, and short-cropped hair gave him a polished appearance, but his eyes, dark and observant, revealed the weight of past struggles. A man of discipline, Marcus was always well-dressed, favoring button-ups and slacks over casual wear. He took pride in his presentation, knowing that in his world, appearances mattered. As a former college athlete, he maintained a strong, athletic build, though his days were now spent behind a counter rather than on the basketball court. Despite the hardships he had faced, losing his mother at a young age, fighting against systemic biases, and constantly proving himself, Marcus remained optimistic. He believed in hard work and honesty, values instilled in him by his grandmother, Evelyn Carter, a retired schoolteacher who had raised him alone. His personality was a mix of charisma and restraint. He was friendly but guarded, quick to flash a warm smile but slow to trust. People often described him as a man of integrity, someone who held his ground even when the odds were against him. Little did he know, his character would soon be tested in ways he never imagined. Marcus's day always began the same way. A morning jog through the city, followed by a cup of black coffee at his favorite corner cafe before heading to work. As an assistant manager at a high-end retail store, he took pride in his job. The store, Regal Attire, was known for its sleek designer suits and clientele that ranged from businessmen to celebrities. Arriving at 8:30 a.m. sharp, Marcus would unlock the glass doors and step inside the pristine showroom. The scent of leather and expensive cologne filled the air as he straightened the mannequins and checked the inventory. By 9 a.m., the store was bustling with customers, some browsing leisurely while others demanded immediate attention. Marcus had an uncanny ability to read people. Whether it was a nervous young man buying his first suit for a job interview or a wealthy executive looking for a custom-tailored fit, he treated each customer with the same level of professionalism and respect. During lunch breaks, he often called his grandmother, checking in on her as she watched her soap operas. In the evenings, he would hit the gym before heading home to his modest but well-kept apartment. He spent his nights reading books on entrepreneurship, dreaming of one day opening his own store. His life was orderly, structured, a carefully crafted routine designed to avoid trouble. But trouble has a way of finding even the most cautious of men. Regal Attire was more than just a store. It was a symbol of luxury and exclusivity. Located in the heart of Buckhead, Atlanta, the store had a reputation for catering to the city's elite. Inside, the mahogany shelves were lined with designer suits, and the marble floors reflected the overhead crystal chandeliers. A long, sleek glass counter displayed gold cufflinks and silk ties, each with a price tag higher than Marcus's rent. The clientele ranged from sports stars to CEOs, many of whom barely acknowledged the staff. Marcus had grown accustomed to the dismissive nods, the way some customers assumed he was just another worker with no ambition. However, he had also earned the respect of his boss, Mr. Caldwell, an older white man who recognized Marcus's dedication and skill. But there was another side to working at Regal Attire, a side that made Marcus uneasy: the unspoken racial profiling. He had witnessed security following black customers while ignoring white ones. He had seen the subtle discomfort when he approached certain clients, their body language shifting as if preparing to be hustled. Despite being an exemplary employee, Marcus could feel the silent suspicions that came with being a black man in an upscale retail environment. It was an unspoken reality, one he had learned to navigate with poise and professionalism. Outside the store, the streets were lined with luxury boutiques, high-end restaurants, and expensive cars. Atlanta was a city of contrast, old money and new dreams, opportunity and discrimination existing side by side. Marcus had worked hard to build a life here, but deep down, he knew he would always have to work twice as hard to be seen as equal. It was only a matter of time before that truth became painfully clear. It started with a simple glance. A woman, a well-dressed, middle-aged white customer, walked into the store that afternoon. Marcus greeted her politely, offering assistance, but she barely acknowledged him. Instead, she clutched her handbag closer and walked past him to speak with another employee. Marcus had seen this before. He knew that look. Still, he remained professional. He had learned to ignore the small injustices, the lingering stares, the assumptions, the way some customers second-guessed his expertise. But what happened next was something he never expected. A sudden commotion near the front of the store. A security guard rushing over. The woman's accusatory voice cutting through the air. "I saw him take it. He stole something." Silence fell over the store as all eyes turned to Marcus. His breath caught in his throat. This wasn't happening. Not to him. Not like this. Continuing from the previous section. The word count will be strictly followed, and the section will be fully completed before moving to the next. The accusation hung in the air like a heavy storm cloud. The woman, now visibly distressed, pointed directly at Marcus. "I saw him take something from the counter," she insisted, her voice sharp with certainty. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. He glanced at his hands, empty. His mind raced. He had been in the middle of adjusting a display when she walked in. What could she possibly think he had stolen? A few customers stopped browsing, their curiosity piqued. Some whispered among themselves, their eyes darting between Marcus and the woman. The tension in the store was palpable, pressing against his chest like a vice. The security guard, a burly man named Rick, stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." Marcus inhaled sharply, steadying himself. He looked at Rick, then at his boss, Mr. Caldwell, who had just walked onto the floor. Caldwell's face was unreadable, but his hesitation spoke volumes. "I didn't take anything," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. The woman scoffed. "I saw you. Don't try to play innocent." Marcus clenched his jaw. He knew this moment, this script. It played out across America time and time again. A black man accused. A white accuser who was instantly believed. Rick gestured toward the back of the store, where the security office was. "Let's sort this out privately." Marcus glanced at Mr. Caldwell one last time, hoping for some intervention. But the store owner simply sighed. "Just go with them, Marcus. Let's clear this up." A familiar disappointment settled in his stomach. Guilty until proven innocent. He nodded and followed Rick to the back of the store. The security office was small and suffocating, a stark contrast to the elegance of the showroom. A single desk, a couple of chairs, and a set of monitors displaying various camera angles of the store. Marcus sat down, his hands clasped together tightly. His heart pounded, but he kept his breathing even. He had been here before, not in this room, but in moments like these. Moments where he had to prove his innocence simply because of the color of his skin. Rick folded his arms, studying him. "Look, man, just tell me if you took something. If it was an accident, we can clear this up." Marcus's eyes flashed with anger. "I didn't take anything." Rick sighed. "We're just following procedure." Marcus knew what that meant. Procedure was the excuse they always used. Procedure was why he had been followed in stores as a teenager. Procedure was why security had eyed him suspiciously when he walked into upscale establishments. His fingers drummed against his knee. He had done everything right, worked hard, stayed professional, never gave anyone a reason to doubt him. And still, here he was. A knock on the door. Mr. Caldwell stepped in, his expression tight with discomfort. "Marcus," he said, not unkindly. "If you just empty your pockets, we can settle this quickly." Marcus looked at him, his stomach twisting. So that's what this was. A test. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus reached into his pockets and pulled them inside out. Nothing. Of course, nothing. The room was silent, but the humiliation burned in his chest. Marcus left the security office without a word. He didn't acknowledge the woman, who was now avoiding his gaze. He didn't look at the customers, some of whom had already moved on as if nothing had happened. He walked past the racks of suits, past the glass counters, past the co-workers who either pitied him or weren't surprised enough to care. As he reached the door, Mr. Caldwell called after him. "Marcus, take the rest of the day off." Marcus paused, but didn't turn around. He didn't argue. What was there to argue? He stepped outside. The air was thick with summer heat, but all he felt was cold rage. He pulled out his phone and called his grandmother. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm as always. "Hey, baby." Marcus swallowed hard. He had no words. She knew. Somehow she always knew. "What happened?" He exhaled, trying to steady his voice. "Nothing, Grandma. Just a long day." She said knowingly. He looked at his reflection in the store window. He had done everything right. And still, it wasn't enough. Not today. Not ever. Continuing from the previous section, the word count will be strictly followed, and the section will be fully completed before moving to the next. Marcus didn't go straight home. Instead, he found himself walking aimlessly, his thoughts tangled in frustration. He ended up at Jefferson Park, where he used to play basketball as a kid. The sound of sneakers squeaking against the pavement and the rhythmic bounce of the ball brought back memories. Back then, life had been simpler. He sat on a bench, staring at the city skyline. Why was he still surprised? He had done everything right. Worked hard, spoke professionally, dressed the part. And yet, when it came down to it, his skin color spoke louder than anything else. His phone buzzed. Jared. Marcus exhaled and answered. Man, what happened? Jared's voice was sharp with concern. I just saw a customer posting about you on Facebook. Marcus stiffened. What? Jared sighed. Some lady was bragging about how she caught a thief at the store today. Comments are already blowing up. Marcus clenched his fist. His name wasn't in the post, but it didn't need to be. People knew. His co-workers, his neighbors, everyone in their social circle would see it. Jared hesitated. Want me to say something? Marcus's jaw tightened. No, not yet. Marcus spent the evening at his grandmother's house. She was cooking dinner, the scent of collard greens and cornbread filling the air. She didn't say anything at first, just watched him. Then, finally, she spoke. They did it again, didn't they? Marcus looked down at his hands. Yeah. She sighed, stirring the pot with slow, deliberate movements. You got a choice to make, baby. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? She turned, wiping her hands on a dish towel. You can let this sit in your chest and weigh you down. Or you can do something about it. Marcus swallowed. Like what? Sue them? Complain? What good will that do? His grandmother tilted her head. I ain't talking about suing. I'm talking about the truth. Marcus's mind turned. The truth. The security footage. Marcus sat on his grandmother's porch after dinner, staring at the city lights. His mind was a battlefield. Would getting the footage even matter? Would anyone care? People believed what they wanted to believe. That woman saw a black man near the counter and assumed the worst. She didn't question it. Neither did the security guard. Neither did his boss. The weight of it pressed down on him, the same way it had since he was a teenager. The first time he was followed in a store. The first time a teacher assumed he was cheating because his grades were too good. The first time he was pulled over for fitting a description. He had played by their rules for so long. And still, here he was. His phone vibrated. Another notification. More comments on the post. Some defending him. Others not so much. He took a breath. If he let this go, it would just be another story. Another moment where the lie drowned out the truth. But if he fought back, really fought back, then maybe, just maybe, he could change the narrative. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind. I'm talking about the truth. He exhaled slowly. Tomorrow, he was going back to that store. Marcus barely slept that night. His mind kept replaying the accusation, the looks, the humiliation. Morning came too soon. He dressed carefully, crisp shirt, clean jeans, presentable but not threatening. He knew how this worked. When he walked into the store, heads turned. Some people avoided eye contact. Others just stared. He walked straight to Mr. Caldwell's office. The store owner looked up, clearly uncomfortable. Marcus, I thought I told you to take some time. Marcus didn't let him finish. I want the security footage. Caldwell blinked. Excuse me. The footage? From yesterday. The camera's near the counter. Caldwell hesitated. Marcus, this isn't necessary. It was just a misunderstanding. Marcus leaned forward, his voice steady. Then prove it. Caldwell stared at him. And in that moment, Marcus saw it. The fear. He wasn't expecting Marcus to push back. He wasn't expecting him to demand the truth. Marcus folded his arms. Let's watch the footage. Everything was about to change. The air in Mr. Caldwell's office felt heavy. Marcus sat across from the store owner, arms folded, his gaze unwavering. He had spent years working here, building a reputation as a hard-working and trustworthy employee. And yet, the moment a white woman pointed a finger at him, all of that vanished. Caldwell cleared his throat, avoiding Marcus's eyes. Look, I don't see what good this will do. The situation has already. Marcus cut in. Play. The footage. A long pause. Caldwell's fingers hovered over his keyboard before he sighed, tapping a few keys. The screen flickered, and the security footage began to play. Marcus leaned in. The timestamp matched. The angle was clear. The counter, the customers, the entire scene in crisp detail. And then, there it was. The woman accusing Marcus stood at the counter, rummaging through her purse. She pulled out her phone, set it down, and continued talking to the cashier. Seconds later, she picked up her wallet, paid, and walked away. Her phone, still sitting on the counter. Marcus's chest tightened. He knew what was coming next. The screen showed Marcus approaching the counter a full minute later. He placed a stack of t-shirts on the surface, waited for the cashier, then turned slightly, his hand nowhere near the phone. Then the woman came back. She spotted Marcus and immediately jumped to conclusions. Marcus clenched his jaw. Caldwell scrubbed the footage forward. The security guard appeared. The confrontation. The humiliation. The whispers. And yet, the truth was right there, in black and white. Caldwell exhaled, leaning back in his chair. His face was pale. He knew he had messed up. Marcus's heart pounded in his ears. He shouldn't have had to do this. The proof was there all along, yet no one had stopped to question the accusation. Caldwell finally spoke. Marcus. Marcus's eyes burned. You let her humiliate me. You fired me without even checking. His voice was calm, but every word carried years of buried frustration. If she had accused Jared, would you have questioned it? Caldwell flinched. That's not. Marcus leaned forward. Yes, it is. Silence. Finally, Caldwell sighed, rubbing his temples. You're right. Marcus waited. Caldwell clicked a few buttons, saving the footage to a drive. He turned the monitor toward Marcus. I'm going to make this right. Marcus narrowed his eyes. How? Caldwell hesitated before pulling out his phone. He scrolled, then placed a call on speaker. Janet, he said when the line picked up. I need you to make a correction. We fired the wrong person. Marcus inhaled sharply. This wasn't just about getting his job back. This was bigger. Marcus should have felt relieved. The truth was out. His name was cleared. But as he walked out of the office, his hands still shook with anger. He passed by coworkers who had stayed silent. Some avoided his gaze. Others muttered awkward apologies. It wasn't enough. He stopped by the registers, where Jared was waiting. Well, Marcus exhaled. They're admitting it. Publicly. Jared's eyebrows lifted. For real? Marcus nodded. Jared studied his face. But that's not enough, is it? Marcus shook his head. They were ready to let me take the fall. His throat tightened. What if there hadn't been cameras? What if they lost the footage? What if I had just walked away and let them win? Jared sighed. Man, we've both seen it too many times. Marcus's jaw clenched. It has to stop. Jared placed a hand on his shoulder. Then make sure it does. Marcus met his friend's eyes. And at that moment, he knew. He wasn't done yet. The next morning, Marcus walked into the store, not as an employee, but as someone demanding accountability. Caldwell had called a staff meeting. Employees gathered near the registers, shifting uncomfortably. The security guard stood at the edge, arms crossed. Even the woman who had falsely accused Marcus had been invited. Caldwell cleared his throat. We need to address a mistake. Whispers rippled through the crowd. He gestured toward Marcus. Yesterday, an employee was wrongly accused and fired without due process. That was our failure. The woman shifted uncomfortably. Marcus raised a hand. Let me. The room fell silent. Marcus looked at the faces around him. I didn't just lose my job yesterday. I lost my dignity. I lost respect. And the worst part? No one stopped to question it. His eyes flickered toward Caldwell. Not even my boss. Caldwell nodded, guilt etched into his face. Marcus exhaled. But I'm not here just to clear my name. I'm here because I know this isn't just about me. He looked around. How many of you have seen this happen before? Maybe to a friend? A stranger? A few employees lowered their gazes. Others nodded. Marcus turned to Caldwell. What's going to change? Caldwell hesitated. Then, he straightened. We're implementing new policies. Accusations will be investigated before action is taken. And, he exhaled, we owe Marcus a public apology. Marcus nodded. It was a start. The store released a public statement acknowledging their mistake. Caldwell personally reached out to Marcus, offering his job back with a promotion. Marcus declined. Instead, he made a counteroffer. I'll come back, but I want to run workplace bias training. Employees need to know how to handle situations like this properly. Caldwell agreed. Within a week, Marcus was standing before his former coworkers, leading the first session. He shared his experience. He brought in speakers. He even arranged for experts to train staff on racial bias and proper conflict resolution. At first, some employees were reluctant. But as Marcus spoke, as he shared stories, not just his own, but of countless others who had suffered the same injustice, people began to listen. By the end of the first session, even the security guard approached him. "I should have handled that differently. I see that now." Marcus gave him a nod. "That's the point. We learn. We do better." Sitting in a cafe a week later, Marcus scrolled through his phone. The store's statement had gone viral. People were talking. More importantly, people were learning. Jared sat across from him. "So what's next?" Marcus smiled. "This isn't just about me. This happens everywhere. People get accused, silenced, punished, for nothing." Jared leaned in. "You thinking bigger?" Marcus nodded. "Workplace reform. Community outreach. Maybe even schools. If we start talking about it now, maybe the next generation won't have to go through what we did." Jared grinned. "Man, you're onto something." Marcus sipped his coffee. For the first time in days, he felt at peace. Later that evening, Marcus walked past the store. The same place where he had been accused. The same place where he had stood, humiliated, while people whispered about him. But this time, something was different. Inside, a new sign had been placed near the entrance. "We stand against bias and false accusations. Training in progress." Marcus smiled. As he turned to leave, a woman, someone he didn't recognize, called out, "Hey, you're Marcus, right?" He turned. She smiled. "I saw your story online. It made me rethink some things." Marcus exhaled. That was all he needed to hear. With his hands in his pockets, he walked into the night, feeling lighter than he had in a long time.